Hi, welcome to this month's Church Growth Minute. Today I'd like to talk about church growth barriers and specifically wanting to break through the more common church growth barriers and what that a church can do in order to achieve this. You see, church growth is more than just numbers. Spiritual growth is, in my opinion, every bit as important as numerical growth. But after a church has failed to see numerical growth for maybe 3-4 consecutive years, then it's normally considered to be in a state of a plateau. Now, plateaus most often occur at around 75. The next one tends to crop up around 125, then 200, and then we commonly see 500, 900, and 1500. In average attendance for your largest attended service. Now, within apostolic churches in general, almost 70% of our churches are in a plateaued condition. And usually that is around 70 to 100 in average attendance. But again, if they've been in that 70 to 100 attendance level for 3 or 4 years, they can usually consider themselves to be plateaued. So attendance plateaus are often broken pretty quickly, but this is only true once a pastor addresses and then removes the barriers that have kept the church in a stagnant state. And it tends to grow rather quickly, usually within about 3 years, to the next plateau. And then some other things need to be implemented, some changes need to be set forth in order to break through that plateau and then go on into the next. Barriers to growth are many. There's lots of things that can stop a church from growing, and they do tend to differ from church to church. The more common barriers to church growth are as follows. Number one is a lack of emphasis upon prayer. Believe me, few things will affect your church more strongly and more substantially than not placing prayer as a high priority within your church. And so if you find that your church is not praying together in a corporate sense on a regular, consistent basis, if prayer is not a high priority in the church, that you don't have regular activities throughout the year in prayer, lack of prayer is a definite barrier to church growth. Secondly, is a lack of emphasis upon new convert care and discipleship. When a church is having an open back door, people are coming in through the front door getting saved, and within a few weeks or a few months they end up not coming any longer, that is a very definite barrier to church growth. And so growing churches have to put a strong emphasis upon new convert care and discipleship. The third thing that will tend to cause growth barriers is a lack of emphasis upon evangelism and seed sowing ministries. Just very simply, if a church is not sowing the gospel seed, there's very little that can grow. It doesn't matter how good the ground is. It doesn't matter how much you water the ground. It doesn't matter if you keep the weeds from growing in that ground, and on and on and on. If no seed has been planted in the soil, then very little is going to grow. So a church has to have a consistent and a steady emphasis upon evangelism and seed sowing ministries. The fourth barrier to church growth is the lack of organization and leaders to support that organization. It does little good to have this huge emphasis upon evangelism, but because of the leadership and organizational elements to maintain that size of church, it will tend to lose a lot of the members. Number 5 is a lack of effective management system to inspire ministry leadership. So you say, well, how is this different than organization? Well, organization is the structure. And so it's the departments and the leaders and them knowing their ministries and programs effectively. Management is what makes that organization work. So you can have this great organization, but if you fail in the management area, then that organization will not be successful. So a lack of an effective management system to keep your ministries challenged and your leaders excited and focused can be a very definite growth barrier. Next is the failure to address the spiritual authority of a Jezebel spirit. In other words, if you have people in the church, individuals that are constantly challenging your spirit and subverting pastoral authority, or a lot of gossip, or an emphasis on hyper spirituality to the point that they chase new converts off and so on, this can be a real barrier to church growth. And so when a pastor fails to assume the spiritual authority, to take priority over these what I call Jezebel type spirits, then that can be a real hindrance to growth. Finally is a failure to teach God's plan for financing the church through tithing and sacrificial offerings. Finance is an important element to a growing church. And if a church is constantly struggling financially and has a constant need for finances to be increased and falling short in the financial area, that can be a real barrier to church growth. But beyond solving various different church restrictive barriers, a church must also take proactive measures to press toward the next level of growth. And so things that a church needs to focus upon, again, besides removing barriers, but doing things to be proactive in their church growth efforts, is number one, expand your vision. Growing churches intend to grow, and they know what they want to do. They know where they want to go, and if you wish to grow within a particular time frame, you've got to have a vision. Most churches can usually double their current average attendance within 3 to 5 years by implementing a very solid and proactive church growth plan. I usually encourage churches to use what is called the 5-year numerical growth worksheet to set your goals for attendance, goals for membership, and goals for new converts. That 5-year numerical goal worksheet is found in the total church growth material. Number 2, proactive, is to expand your knowledge. The lead pastor, the senior pastor of the church, has got to educate himself or herself if they want their church to grow. And so I would encourage you to select a dozen or so different books on church growth, those that have proven to be most helpful, and read them, study them, and then develop a detailed implementation plan for growth. And finally, the third thing I would encourage you to focus upon proactively is to expand your evangelism plan. Every church has got to have a successful strategy for increasing the number of church visitors, following up on those visitors, teaching home Bible studies, encouraging saints to consistently witness, and to increase their Sunday school attendance. These are key factors when it comes to evangelism. Again, let me go through that list again. For evangelism, you need to increase church visitors, follow up on those visitors, encourage them to return, because again, most people do not receive the Holy Ghost until they've come 3, 4, 5 times the church. Only a very small percentage have visitors receive the Holy Ghost for the first time they come. So there must be a strong visitor follow-up ministry in a church to encourage those visitors to come back. There should be an emphasis on teaching home Bible studies. Home Bible study has been one of the most successful methods of seed sowing. They need to encourage the saints to witness, because it's the witnessing that's going to get you your visitors and get you your home Bible studies. And then, of course, increasing Sunday school attendance. And when a church increases their overall attendance, their membership growth tends to follow in a similar pattern. The fourth thing I would encourage you to do proactively to help your growth is to expand your staff. And by that I mean both volunteered and paid staff within your church. Developing a team ministry in a church is an absolute must. There should be at least 10 to 12 major department leaders within your church, and you should meet with those leaders monthly to implement your growth strategy. And that strategy should have been developed at an annual planning retreat. Every department should have a written plan for seeing their ministry grow, a plan to solve problems and to reach souls. Number 5, proactive, is to expand your facilities. Churches rarely grow beyond 80% of their seating capacity. If you're already at that 80% factor as far as the seating capacity of your sanctuary, then your building has become a hindrance to your growth. If you are anywhere close, you need a solid plan to address your facility and to have the room to grow if you want the church to grow. Finally, number 6, you need to train future leaders. As a church grows, its organization has got to grow as well. Enlarged organization requires more staff, both paid and volunteer. So you've got to begin training today for the leaders that you're going to need in 3 to 5 years. Why? It takes time to train and develop leaders. And so today you have to look ahead 4, 5, 6 years and ask yourself, how many leaders are we going to need in that 4 or 5 year mark, and begin to train today those individuals that you hope to eventually use in leadership positions. All of what I've talked about here today is found in greater detail in the material that is called Total Church Growth. I would encourage you, if you want to overcome growth barriers, if you found yourself in a stagnant place to where your church has not been growing within the last 3 to 4 years, you need to get Total Church Growth, and you can do so by calling 1-800-800-0247. That's the Apostolic Information Service, and you can order it from us, or you can call the Pentecostal Publishing House. They carry it as well. I hope that you can see your church grow beyond your current plateaued state. It is the will of God for your church to grow.